Welcome back to the College Initiatives ACT Prep video series. This is the first video for the math section, and there will be 3 videos for the math section. This video is going to focus on algebra, the next one will focus on geometry, and the final one will focus on trigonometry. With this one, I'm going to go through algebra skills and algebra vocabulary, because if you don't have vocabulary regarding algebra, and on the next 2 videos, of course, geometry and trigonometry, you're going to have a hard time on the math test. If you know these different words, you should be able to manipulate the problems really quickly and easily, so I want to give you that time to understand that. So some quick stats: the math has 60 questions, 60 minutes to complete them. I've already mentioned that it goes over algebra, geometry, and trigonometry. Again, this video is going to deal with algebra. So, absolute value is a number's distance from 0 on the number line. For an example, -2 and 2 both have an absolute value of 2 because they're both 2 spaces away from 0. I'm not going to linger too long on each slide, so if you ever need to stop and write down a definition, just feel free to pause the video. So an integer is any number that can be expressed without a fraction, decimal, or special symbol, and it can be negative or positive. So with that can be a 1, a 2, a 3, a -1, a -2, a -3, but it cannot have a fraction or a decimal. And an exponent is a superscript number next to a number. It indicates that that number is multiplied by itself, the number the exponent represents. So for an example, 2 to the third, or 2 cubed, means that 2 is multiplied by itself 3 times. 2 times 2 would be 2 squared, which is 4. 2 cubed would be 8. So anytime you see that little superscript up there, that means that you multiply that number by itself that many times. Multiples. A lot of times you're going to have to find something called the least common multiple of a couple of numbers. What that means is a multiple of an integer is a number that can be reached when the integer is multiplied by another integer, and every integer is the smallest multiple of itself. What I mean by that is 4 is a multiple of 2 because 2 times 2 equals 4. 8 is also a multiple of 2 because 2 times 4. 10 is a multiple of 2 because 2 times 5. Any number of things can be multiples. They are technically infinite. Factors, on the other hand, are kind of the opposite of a multiple. A factor of an integer is an integer that can be multiplied by another integer to arrive at the original integer. So that means 1 is a factor of every single integer, and every integer is its own greatest factor. These are limited, they're not infinite like multiples. So for an example, 2 is a factor of 8 because 2 times 4 equals 8. Another factor of 8 would be 1, and 8 because 1 times 8, of course, is 8. A rational number is any number that can be expressed as a ratio of 2 integers. So some examples of that are 4, 3.0, 0.428. Essentially, if this number itself is finite, so if it's like a whole number or a small decimal or something along those lines, it's going to be a rational number. An irrational number is any number that can't be expressed as a ratio of 2 integers. So like pi, we know that pi, mathematicians have been trying to solve that for a while, and it just keeps going. The square root of just about any number will also be an irrational number because the square root of 2 is, multiple numbers after a decimal. So you can't have that as a rational number. Instead, it's going to be an irrational number. Combinations. So this is going to be some dense text here. I'm going to read it to you, and then I'm going to give you an explanation. So if the first of 2 events could happen in any one of x ways, and the second of 2 events could happen in any one of y ways, then the total number of ways that the events could happen together is given by x, y. So essentially what that means is, if you're going to a restaurant and it only has 3 different options for what you can order as your entree. Maybe you've got steak, you've got a hamburger, and you've got chicken. So you have 3 options there for the entree, and then there are 5 desserts. You've got cake, ice cream, flan, milkshakes, and pie. So you've got 3 options for your entree, and you've got 5 options for your dessert. If you want to figure out how many different options you have for those combinations, you're going to multiply your X number of entrees, so that's 3, by your Y number of desserts, which is 5. So that means that there are going to be 15 possible combinations here. You could have your chicken and your pie, you could have your steak and your milkshake, you could have your hamburger and your flan. Ultimately, to figure out how many different combinations there are, you multiply your X by your Y. A logarithm is an expression that tells us how many times we multiply one number by itself to get another number. So if something's written out log x of y equals z, that means that you multiply x by itself z times to get y. A polynomial is an expression that includes multiple terms, at least one of which contains a variable. So 5x plus 3, 4ab plus 5a. The list could go on and on and on, but if it's got at least one variable, it's technically a polynomial. An inequality, you've probably gone over these pretty frequently. It's just a statement that makes use of one of the following signs: less than, more than, less than or equal to, or greater than or equal to. A lot of times you're going to have to compare those across sides, but as long as you know what these mean, it shouldn't be too terribly difficult. A mean, the average set of numbers. Mean and average are essentially the same thing. What you do, you add the numbers up and divide them by the number of things added together. So for an example, 2 plus 3 equals 7, or I'm sorry, wow. 2 plus 3 equals 5, plus 4 equals 9. 9 is going to be divided by 3 because there are 3 terms here, 1, 2, 3, and that's going to come out as 3. Your mean or your average for this set of numbers, 3. A median, the number in the middle of a set of numbers when those numbers are ordered from least to greatest. So for an example right here, that 2 plus 3 plus 4, 3 is going to be your median. We've already got them lined up from least to greatest. 3 is going to be your median here. What happens when it's an even set of numbers though? You average the 2 numbers in the middle. So if I took away this equals sign here and it were 2, 3, 4, and 9, I've got even numbers. So what I've got to do is add this 3 and 4 together, which makes 7. Then I'm going to divide that by 2 because there are 2 terms, which is going to give us a 3.5. So the median for that, 3 plus 4, 7, divided by 2, 3.5. And then your mode. Mode's really easy. It's the number that appears most in the set more than any other number. So if up here I had 2 plus 3 plus 3, then 3 would be our mode because it occurs more than 2. Almost done here. So a linear function is such that all the x and y value pairings form a straight line when they're plotted as points on a graph. So that could look like y equals 2x plus 5, y equals 3x plus 7, y equals x plus 11. Any number of things, if it makes a straight line, that means there's no superscript here, no exponent, then it's going to be a linear function. On the other hand, a quadratic function, the x term is squared, and you can see that represented by a curved line or a parabola on the coordinate plane. So y equals x squared plus 3. If you've got x squared in here, it's automatically going to be that quadratic function. Real number is any number that doesn't involve I or the square root of a negative number. So if I is not in there or the square root of a negative number isn't in there, it's a real number. An imaginary number is any number that involves the imaginary quantity I. And I here represents the square root of -1. So some examples, 14i, square root of -7. If it's got that I in there or a negative square root, it's imaginary. A complex number is any number that involves a real number and an imaginary number. So like a 4 plus I, 6 minus 3I, or maybe 6 minus radical negative 7. It's going to be a complex. Arithmetic sequence. It's a sequence that relies on addition or subtraction to generate the next term. Pretty easy. Geometric is going to be one that relies on multiplication or division to generate the next term. The common difference is the difference between two consecutive terms in an arithmetic sequence, so that means that you just subtract one from the other. And a common ratio is the same thing, but in a geometric sequence. So that's a lot of information for algebra. Like I said, if you don't know these words, you're going to struggle a little bit on that. So make sure you go back through this video, copy down any terms that you didn't get. If you are unclear about anything, feel free to shoot me an email. Otherwise, stay tuned for video 2 in the math series of the ACT series, which is going to be geometry.